That was Brady Knowles. We'd like to thank Brady especially. He's with doTERRA and is here helping to take care of our facilities. Let's give him a round of applause, and doTERRA also. My name is David Atchison. I'm a former chair of the Utah County Republican Party, and I am privileged to be associated with great people like Shane Pierce and Laura Lynn Everting, and am grateful for the opportunity to be here. As I was here last week with the Senate 14 district race, the debate, I shared with you that I have no horse in these races, and so it's nice to be here, and it's nice to be able to help. We've got a representative from both Xani and from Brian's teams that are helping my wife Barbara and my son Chase in making sure that the questions that are brought forward come forward in a timely manner and in a way that everybody feels good and comfortable about them. So with that, we'll begin now with our first question, and we'll start out with a finance question. And if you'll take 60 seconds, Shane is here. Shane, do you want to hold those up? Can you see? Oh, yeah.
Can we make a motion?
Oh, would you?
Introduce ourselves?
Oh, yeah. You know what? That's a great idea. Why don't we do that? You're right. I forgot about that. So we're going to, yes. No, that is exactly what I wanted to do, but I was so anxious to get these questions, but you're right. We're going to give you 2 minutes each to introduce yourselves. And Shane is got as our timer. If anybody wants to turn around and see Shane as he's holding up these pieces of paper, that shows the amount of time that they get to start with, and then it's a countdown to 30, and then 10, and then you need to stop. Does that make sense? Great. All right, so with that, Xani, we'll start with you. Would you take 2 minutes to introduce yourself? And if you can't hear any of us, just let me know. Just call it out, and then we'll get closer to the microphones or whatever. Okay, Xani, take it away for 2 minutes. Tell us about yourself.
All right. My name is Xani Hanie. I am from Pleasant Grove, and I wanted to thank you all tonight for being delegates and coming out. Coming out tonight. I believe that our lives revolve around our family, our home, and our pursuit of happiness. We value our Republican principles of faith, family, prosperity, and freedom. Our district is growing, and we have the time now to build a better future. This is why I am running. I am committed to knocking down the barriers. I am committed to my core values for a Republican. And I am committed to a vision for allowing our district to move forward. Lastly, I want to stand here in 2 years and tell you that I truly believe in limited government. I don't believe that 1,300 bills is limited government. I believe that that is a waste of our time and a waste of our taxpayers' money. Every time a bill is passed, it is a burden on our family, our community, and our economic development. I am going to limit legislation and waste. Every 2 years, we present a unique opportunity, the ability to change and the ability to navigate our future in the direction that we deserve. I am not a placeholder, nor am I groomed for this position. I am a person who seeks change and the values and the input from our neighbors, our community, and our families.
Thank you.
Greene. I know many of you. I've been your representative for the last, we're in the 4th year now. Don't want to get ahead of myself. We've still got most of this year to go. But it has been my distinct honor to serve this district. And I've watched this district grow, and I've seen doTERRA come here. And I want to acknowledge them and thank them for opening up this beautiful venue for us tonight. Yeah, they've been a great corporate citizen. I want to thank our legislative district members and chair in organizing this, and our moderator, Dave Atchison. But especially I want to thank you, the delegates, for your involvement, not just in being here tonight, but your commitment to a caucus convention process that I think is the premier nomination process in our nation. the diligence that you demonstrate in getting to know the candidates, it lets me know that you see the value in this process as well, and that you look beyond the trivial. Because of my confidence in you as delegates, this is my fate. My fate is in your hands. I am not seeking an alternative or backup route to the ballot. I'm trusting in you. But you know, campaigns are many times filled with sound bites, and at this stage of the game, you're probably scratching your head asking, what is the difference between the candidates? Well, I want to assure you that there are differences. 4 years ago, when I first ran for this office, I talked a lot about principles, and I've continued to talk about principles. And as we go through this process tonight, I simply ask this of you. Gauge my answers, judge my answers based on the principles that I have espoused over these last 4 years and that I have served with faithfully. And I ask you to judge me on that and not on any of the other rhetoric that may be going around out there. So thank you for being here, and I'm ready for the questions to begin.
Thank you. All right, that was our last time to applaud for the rest of the evening until we get to the end. If that's all right, we appreciate all of the answers that our candidates will be giving, and we know that we'd love to applaud after each one, but in the interests of time and also a sense of fairness. So hold your applause, and you won't get in trouble from me. Is that okay? All right. All right, our first question is a 60-second question. And we'll start, Brian, with you. What is your fiscal philosophy? Xani, you'll get the same question, so listen up. What is your fiscal philosophy? And give an example of how you would apply your principles in making budgeting decisions. Brian.
Great, thank you. Let me just talk about a couple of principles that is a filter for me in every decision I make as your legislator. The first is that the liberties that we enjoy as individuals come to us by our Creator. They are unalienable rights, and they are not granted by government. The second one follows along those same lines, in that in our constitutional republic, the sovereignty resides with the people. We are not subject to government. Government is subject to us. And we form government for some very limited purposes. And those purposes need to be the purposes for which we spend taxpayers' money. We shouldn't expand government with this program or that policy beyond those essential services. And anything that infringes upon our rights as individuals to choose for ourselves, to pursue our own happiness, is an expenditure that I just cannot support. Time went fast.
Thanks. Xani.
So my principles are the strength of family and religion and the strength of our community. I am a believer in no debt. I think that the $1 trillion debt that our country's in and our state debt is not appropriate. I believe we should not be spending money that we don't have. And I think that most of the legislative projects are based on priorities. So as we go through this process, it's all about how the priorities are delegated. And you know what? The legislature controls the $13 billion of taxes that we currently have. And I'm all about a balanced budget. I'm about rainy day funds. And that would be my philosophy going forward on fiscally responsible, no debt.
Thank you.
I remember last...
Would you like a rebuttal? Because then...
Can we do that?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. And then, Xani, what that means is that you'll get an opportunity also. You'll get a skosh more time too.
Are we going to do like 3 rebuttals or every rebuttal?
We're going to do 1. But I don't know. We're going to do what I want, and I'll let you know as we go along. So
Tell us what to do.
you have to just trust me. All right, Brian, go ahead and take. Do you want to take 30 seconds?
Absolutely.
Great. And then Xani, you'll have another 30.
Thank you. This issue of debt is important because we cannot incur debt as a state. We are constitutionally prohibited from incurring debt, and every year your legislature achieves a balanced budget. That is a requirement. We can't borrow to operate government. The only borrowing we can do as a state is for capital improvements. And so was that the red one?
That's the red one. You got 10 seconds.
Oh, that was the orange one. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Anyhow, it is important to be debt-free, both in our personal lives and at the state level.
Xani, further comment? Okay. The next question is 60 seconds. We'll start with you, Xani. What is your occupation, and how will that affect your decisions on the Hill, and how will that inform your decisions on the Hill? And then Brian, you'll be after that. This is 60 seconds.
60 seconds. Okay, talk fast. My occupation is I have an MBA from the University of Utah and a background in finance. I work for a billion-dollar organization and I manage the Western distribution of a US-based manufacturer. I am held accountable by shareholders down to every penny, and that is what I'm committed to doing, is holding our state departments held accountable for every penny. That's it.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you. I'm an attorney by education, although my practice is somewhat non-traditional. I don't have a large clientele. I've been a business owner. I have a small business that is focused on commercial real estate transactions. I do a lot of 1031 exchange work, if anyone knows what that is a tax-deferred exchange of an investment asset. And so I'm accountable for millions of dollars of clients' money on an ongoing basis. The legal background I have has been indispensable in serving as your representative. That is one thing I think that is sorely lacking in our legislature, is the understanding of law, how to make law, how to read law, how to interpret law, how to analyze law. We get a lot of bad laws because of the lack of understanding we have there. That has been invaluable to me in that service.
Thank you. Next, we're going to start with you, Brian, and then Xani. And the question is, and this will be 60 seconds, what are your top legislative priorities?
You know, I don't have an agenda. I've never had an agenda. I've never said I'm going to pursue this policy or try to create a new program. I look at government differently. I don't think that we get good government when we focus on government or what government can do for us. The thing that promotes good government is the ability of citizens to exercise their freedom and their choice. That has been my legislative priority for 4 years, to protect your individual liberties, your economic freedom, and to protect your ability to pursue your brand of happiness. As I said, I think when we place too much emphasis on government to try to promote good government, we actually get the exact opposite. And so that will be my continued priority, is to protect your interest, to fight against bills that unnecessarily infringe upon our individual lives. Thank you.
Thank you. This will be Brian, starting with you, and then Xani. And the question is, sorry, Xani. I got my little paper up here, and I'm not keeping track. So go ahead, Xani.
Well, I do. My number one priority is to represent our district, and the second priority that I have would be to get state agencies the ability to have a rainy day fund. So currently, our school district's rainy day fund is your kids running laps or selling cookie dough. So that would be one of my priorities. The third priority that I have would be to limit the number and repeal laws that are currently burdening our families, our liberties, and our pursuit of happiness.
Thank you. And now, Xani, you'll be first, and then Brian. And the question is, there are many things that make you and your opponent that appear to be the same between you and your opponent, and ideals. What are some things that distinguish you from your opponent? Starting with Xani, and this is for 60 seconds.
Well, I think that's the benefit when we run a Republican versus Republican. That's a good thing, in my opinion, is that we all believe in the Republican values, and we're all very, very similar in that. I think we've seen that debate over debate through the last couple weeks that we've all attended those. I would say the biggest difference between my opponent and I would be our levels of education. So Brian also has a great master's or a doctorate degree, and I have an MBA. So currently there's 14 legislatures in the House that are attorneys. There's 3 MBAs. So for me, I would believe that the biggest difference between us would be our backgrounds and our education.
Brian.
As I said in my opening statement, at this stage of the campaign process, there are a lot of sound bites that sound a lot alike. We all talk about limited government. We talk about getting rolling back government regulation. We talk about fiscal responsibility. You know all the hot buttons. You know all the sound bites. You've heard them all. And it does become difficult for you as delegates to discern those differences. But here is the easy answer in this case. I have a 4-year record that shows fidelity to those principles, to the principles that we all espouse during the campaign season. How frustrated have you been each election cycle where you hear opponents make campaign promises only to violate them as quickly as they go into office? My record shows that that has not been the case, that I have stood firm on every one of the principles that I have espoused.
Thank you.
Can I read that?
Yes, you may. Take 30 seconds.
So I don't have a record, and I have had that conversation come up several times over the last 2 weeks. And I just wanted to put it out there that I had a family that I started, and I furthered my education to get a master's degree. And that's why I don't have a record, is I currently, the time in my life, I'm ready to give 110%, and everybody has to start somewhere.
Brian, would you like to take 30 seconds?
No, I'll save that.
Okay. This will be Brian first and then Xani, and this is a 60-second question. And that is, we assume that you would work to cut spending. If that is correct, could you give some concrete examples?
The budgeting process that we have at the legislature is not a very prudent one. It is not a very efficient one, but it is a subject or is a product of our 45-day cycle. Mostly what we deal with at the legislature, and this is by custom and rule, is figuring out where we're going to spend the increased revenue from this year versus last year. I have been an advocate for changing that process, for dealing with the inefficiencies that we just continually roll forward in the base budget, which is essentially the previous year's budget. If there are inefficiencies, if there are waste, those are difficult to detect. We need a different budget process, but the budgeting is done by and large at the legislature by the Executive Appropriations Committee, which is leadership in both House and the Senate. The run-of-the-mill legislator, until you achieve that level of leadership, doesn't have a whole lot to do with the budgeting process.
Thank you. Xani.
So I had the great privilege this week of sitting down with Representative Arendt, who is part of that committee and part of the leadership. And the spending comes from pet projects or priorities. So she explained this to me is just like you and I have our priorities of how we're going to run our money, of are we going to spend for college or are we going to put our money towards a vacation. That's how the state legislature budgeting works. And my commitment, I believe we have a lot of frivolous spending for one UTA. I don't trust them. I think there's way too many people. There's, I think, 65 people making over $150,000. The average salary in Utah is $65,000. So that would be my first place I would start.
Thank you. This first question will be for, oh yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Is this 30 seconds?
You got 30 seconds.
I agree with Xani on UTA. Transit serves a purpose, but we have way overfunded transit and we have not held them accountable. I tried to run a bill this last session because the county ran Prop 1 a year ago. We defeated it soundly because it gave way too much of the money to Prop 1. I knew that this district sorely needed that money for our local roads. And I ran that bill to reappropriate that money from what would otherwise go to the UTA to the cities. Unfortunately, I didn't get a whole lot of support from municipalities within the district. So we need to work on that as well.
Thank you. Xani?
So I agree, Prop 1, the 40% was a little outrageous, but I do know that Representative Draxel was able to pass Bill 183, which was for Cache County and those smaller portions of Cache County, Iron County, all were able to get the money and the allocations somewhat changed in the equation of what went back to there. And so currently, they were able to kind of work together and solve that problem, and here we are still with the same issues in roads.
Thank you. I want to be clear where you are on Prop 1, if that's okay. So, Brian, were you in favor of Prop 1, yes or no?
I was opposed to it, and I was vocally opposed to it.
Okay, and Xani?
No, I was not.
You were opposed to it?
Yes.
Okay,
Sorry.
all right, thank you. Good. All right, thank you. All right, the next question is going to be Xani and then Brian. And this question is, actually I just addressed that, Prop 1, there we go. This is going to be 90 seconds, Shane. So what are the major issues facing District 57 and how do you plan to address them? So focusing on District 57, Xani.
So I think I've attended several city council meetings, both in Pleasant Grove and American Fork City Council over the last year and a half. And I think the biggest issue I hear is infrastructure, and I'll point that directly down to roads. I don't think that that's any big surprise to anyone in this room. What I would do is we need to work, as much as we don't like to talk about big lobbyists on the Hill, the issue is they can help us get things done. If we looked at how they worked on Prop 1 and working through all the different city entities, we have to come together in a room and negotiate together. This is a very complex multi-party negotiation, and when we have negotiations, the basis of negotiations start with what we call a BATNA. Everybody has their walk-away point, and they have their portion that they're willing to kind of negotiate on. I don't think UTA for Utah County is a negotiating point, but what we do need is we need to come to a resolution. We need to work with the city leagues, and we need to work through them. And you know what? Once we get those people part of our plan, the job can get done.
Brian.
I think this is a question that everybody knows the answer to. It is our infrastructure, primarily roads, but also our utilities, our underground utilities are past the date of their useful life. And I'm not talking by a little bit, by decades in some cases. And the longer we delay maintenance and repair on this infrastructure, the more costly it becomes. This is an issue that needs to be resolved at multiple levels. Our cities, quite frankly, need to prioritize. If those are the priorities, that isn't what we're seeing from the way we're spending money at the local level. We need to prioritize. There are things we can do at the state level. I've tried to do those things, but I've got to have the help of the cities here in this district. I've got to have them. You were talking about a negotiation. Xani's exactly right. We have got to have everyone at the table. And because of politics and personalities, that seems to get in the way of doing what you, the people we represent, really need. I'm committed to doing this. I'm committed to running the same bill again next year to deal with Prop 1 and deal with our transportation funding. But it is a compromise. It is a cooperative effort. I've got to have the assistance of the other elected officials within this district.
The next question is going to start with Brian and then Xani, and that follows up on what we've just talked about, which is, will your politics or personality get in the way of getting your job done? Brian.
How many seconds?
30.
That I will do everything possible to make sure that that doesn't happen. That that's not a guarantee that anyone can make. Oftentimes there are personality conflicts. I have been able to work through those, though, and I have been able to achieve a great many things as far as legislation at the state level. And what I don't achieve one year, I don't abandon. I just passed a bill this year that took me 3 years to make that change, and I'm committed to doing that, whatever it takes. I'll stick with it.
Xani.
So, sorry, I forgot to turn it on. So for me, I feel like I am not a prisoner of my own perceptions. So for me, I feel like I can get those things done. I'm a big collaborator. I think that if we can work together and we can solve problems, and the more people that can come to the table and the more we can talk about it and the more we, work through these issues, with it being whether I come to you or you come to me, I'm committed to coming to you. I'm not always gonna wait for you to come to me. Sorry.
Thank you. Xani, we'll start with you for this. And the question is, this is a 2-minute question. And this has to do with 3 things: the US Constitution, the Utah Constitution, and then our caucus system. Is there anything that you would change about any of these 3 things? And how do you feel currently about the caucus system?
So I love the caucus system. I have had the opportunity to sit down and meet with most of you one-on-one. That's the benefit of the caucus system. The biggest problem that I have with the caucus system is we've had 2 weeks. So that's not so much of an issue for our race, but I would caution that on the county commissioner. They have 1,700 delegates. It's almost physically impossible to sit through and meet 1,700 delegates. And so for my race, I think the caucus system is great. 112 people to get to know. I've had the opportunity to sit with most of you. That's what I love, is the one-on-one. I love hearing about the issues, and I love the questions. For me, the U.S. Constitution, I think it was inspired, divinely inspired. I am not open to the Article 5 option. I think that there's too many risks and too many unknowns with that. That's basically saying you're going to bring the Republicans and the Democrats. I don't think we ever thought that the Supreme Court would approve Obamacare, and here we are with Obamacare. So for me, I'm very risk averse, and I don't like the opportunity of that. The biggest thing that I like about the Utah Constitution is I believe that it says we have local control, and the people that are local elected officials know what's going on the most. And that is what I like about all 3 of those.
Brian.
Thank you. I think I'll go in the exact opposite order. I'll start with the U.S. Constitution. I also believe that our founders were inspired. I believe it was an inspired document, but I don't believe even our founders believed it was a perfect document. There have been multiple changes to our U.S. Constitution. Some of them have been good, some of them have been horrible, and I am certainly open to repealing some of those amendments. I think the 17th Amendment was a mistake. I think the 16th Amendment was a mistake. And there are portions of the 14th that cause us trouble today, not necessarily because of the amendment text itself, but because of the way the Supreme Court has interpreted that, which leads me to another concern with our Constitution. We have checks and balances in our Constitution. The legislative branch has checks on the executive and judicial, and each one has checks on the others. The people have a check on the legislative and the executive. We can vote them out if we don't like them. What we're missing is a check from the people on the judicial branch. Wouldn't that be nice if the justices on the Supreme Court that have life tenure had to at least stand for a retention vote of the people? We don't want them engaged in campaigns, I understand that, but to come before the people every 6 or 8 years and say, should this person be retained as a Supreme Court justice? That may have some merit. So the caucus system is near and dear to my heart. I have been involved in the caucus system each year that I've lived in Utah. It is something that I believe is responsible, primarily responsible for the good government that we have in this state. We're always acknowledged as one of the best managed states, and I think that is because of the way we elect our legislature and our other elected officials. I am not seeking to circumvent the caucus. I want to strengthen it, and I see I'm out of time. There's one other thing. I think we should change the year in which we elect our delegates. Too many delegates come to this process with their mind already made up, and they don't engage as they should. I think we should elect our delegates in the odd year, so they are there to serve for 2 years because they want to serve, not just because they want to support a single candidate in a single race.
Xani, Brian took a few seconds over. Did you want to have any further comments to that question?
Left me time. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
I'm just kidding.
No,
Okay.
I'm good.
All right. This is a 2-minute question also, and we'll start with Brian and end with Xani, and this is about education. What is the role of the Utah State Board of Education? And has the Utah legislature given the state school board more power than it should, or does it have just the right amount? And then also, how would you give more control back to local schools, districts, teachers, parents? Brian,
How much time is it?
2 minutes.
Well, I don't think our legislature has given too much power to the Board of Education. I don't think that is the role of the legislature. The Constitution firmly establishes, the state Constitution in Article 10, Section 3, that the general supervision and control of the public education system is vested in the Board of Education, the State Board of Education. I think, if anything, the legislature has interfered too much with the State Board of Education. There are 15 districts around the state, equally populated, just like Senate and House districts. And we have a representative to the state school board from each one of those districts. They are every bit your representative, your elected representative, as I am in the legislature. But they deal exclusively with our public education system. I think over the years, the legislature has intervened too much, has essentially neutered the state school board, and they got to a point where they weren't very effective or they weren't very assertive. We've seen a change in that in these last few years. I'm excited to see the new energy that's been brought to the state school board with a lot of the people who have been either elected or appointed to fill vacancies there in the last few years. And I think that they are asserting their authority, so much so that they asked the legislature to modify all current state statute that makes reference to a state office of education, because that's sort of the bureaucracy that had grew up to fill the void as the state board of education took a back seat to the legislature. Now they want to come forward and reassert that authority. I think that's great. So we amended all statutes this past session to get rid of reference of any delegation of authority to them and put in their place the term State Board of Education. So I'm happy to see that. I think that the state board is much more capable in working with the local boards to really get that education down to the local level. I think the legislature interferes too much with pet projects in education. I consistently vote against most of those as indicator. Excuse me, I'm out of time. I don't want to go over again.
Thank you. Xani.
So education is the future of our country, right? I am a big proponent of that. I do not think that the state legislature oversteps their boundaries as far as the state school board. I do believe, though, that the money is controlled by the state legislature, and I believe that if we could have more of a collaboration with the school boards locally and get the funnel directly to where it needs to go, down into the grassroots of our classrooms and our teachers, that would be a benefit for all of our kids. I believe that, our teachers are doing the best they can. I think that the school board, I believe that a lot of us don't pay attention to the school board elections. I think that we don't understand exactly what they control. They control our Common Core, they control our curriculums, they control our SAGE exams, and those are the issues that I have constantly heard time and time again. And I believe if we can take more of an active role in that and get more of the legislature out of it, and maybe we just give them more active actions to the dollars, and they can get that down to the teachers and get it to where it needs to be to enlighten our kids. I think the less one-stop shop that we have the legislature trying to make for the education, the better off we are going to be. Because no district is alike, no child is alike, and no educator and teacher is alike. They know what they need for their classrooms. If one person on the Capitol Hill does not know what our teachers need. And so I've spent time with different K through 12 schools, different schools throughout our district, and every single classroom that I met with had something different and was teaching differently. So I believe the less we're involved and the more we give control to the state school boards and our local principals and our parents, that's the best way.
Thank you. This will be Xani first and then Brian. And this will be for, I've got two here I'm going to combine. So this will be for 60 seconds, which is, why are you running for the House position and not the Senate position? And how do you measure the success of a legislator? Xani.
That's a great question. So I think that the House is typically more of a sway. So the Senate is more known as the stable one. So for me, I think that my opinions in the House and bringing that knowledge in is where I benefit the most. So that's why I'm running for the House. I also like to have smaller community. I believe in really representing Pleasant Grove and a sliver of American Fork. That's my grassroots, and that's the other reason, is I think that the smaller and more constituents that I can connect with, the better I'm going to be.
How do you measure the success of a legislator?
The success to me is measured by how few laws you have tried to push. 1,300 bills a year is out of control. 500 approvals is out of control. I want to stand here to you in 2 years and say, you know what? My record is not an additional 35 or 50 bills.
Brian.
Thank you. Well, I'm running for the House because I'm currently serving in the House. I have been for a few years now, and there's still much work to do. I've got some things I need to accomplish, and for the stability of the district, I think it's important to have some longevity there. Whether we like it or not, the legislature is very seniority structured, and you don't have the same representative capacity, the ability to represent the constituents as a new legislature as you do with a senior legislature. You don't get into those leadership positions until you've been there a number of years. And that's important to the district, to not continue to turn this over. I do want to respond to the 1,300 bill accusation that's constantly thrown out there, because there are 1,300 bill files, not bills. And it takes a bill to repeal a law the same as it takes a bill to make a new law. So not every bill is a new law. I think the success of a legislator is determined by how well they protect and defend your rights and your liberties. And I have done that, and I've got the record to prove it.
Thank you. Xani, did you want to take a few more seconds on that? Any other things to say? Okay. This next is Brian, starting with Brian and then with Xani. And this is 30 seconds. What do you think the state legislature can do to protect the state from the overreach of federal influence? And we are going to get to Medicaid in another question, right? And some other specific federal issues. So I'll read it again. So 30 seconds. What do you think the state legislature can do to protect the state from the overreach of federal influence?
I think it begins with an understanding of the federal Constitution and the 10th Amendment. And we are not necessarily obligated to subject ourselves to every whim and every policy of the federal government. We need to understand and we need to know what authorities the federal government has under that Constitution. The 10th Amendment reserves the rest of the states, and we need to have legislators that are confident enough to challenge those unconstitutional policies that are promoted by the federal government. I have done that in a number of cases.
Xani.
Well, I believe that the majority of our overreach is because of money. I think that we enact props from all these pet projects that our current congressmen's passed down to us. I mean, if we look at even infrastructure, they want to have their hands in that. We look at our federal lands, they want to control that. This is all over money. And so if we can combat that and try to become more self-sufficient as a state, we can minimize some of that.
Thank you. And now this is going to be Xani and then Brian. And this is a 90-second question. And it is, please talk about Medicaid expansion. Xani.
Well, Medicaid expansion is a very, very complex issue. I have done some research on that. You know, originally, I believe that comes with a $60 million price tag for our state. That's a lot of money. Obviously the need was there. I don't like the way that we turned it the super needy this year. I disagree with that terminology, but I also think that we have the need. But the second that we asked the doctors to pay for it, it was like, whoa, 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 we don't have the need anymore. So for me, I think we can do something, but this has to be something that our state can hold accountable for the following generations to come. Thinking that we can just have these one-time $60 million budgets is not going to work. This needs to be an issue that we forecast and that we can continue to work for. This isn't an easy solution. We obviously need it, but I also don't believe that the government just constantly handing out dollars or services is always the right solution. I am much more for let's change the behavior and let's change the incentives and let's try to get people back on their feet rather than just constantly living off the government. My economic professor once said, you can get $4,500 a month to live off of all the government programs. In my opinion, that isn't helping society.
Brian.
Thank you. I think what Xani's talking about is a small Medicaid expansion program the state passed this year to help to expand a little bit beyond what we've had in the way of traditional Medicaid. But Medicaid expansion is something much broader than that. It is actually the preferred health care plan under Obamacare. It is the extension of Obamacare. Our governor has tried for a few years to get the state to adopt a full-blown Medicaid expansion program that would put over 100,000 people, mostly able-bodied working or work-capable adults, on a permanent welfare program. I think there's a need out there, but it's a limited need, and we need to focus in on what that need is. I have no problem with the government providing a safety net for people that are really in those dire situations. And then, of course, there's a longer-term need for those who are permanently disabled or permanently unable to work. But what we can't do is create a program that turns a temporary safety net into a long-term, permanent Medicare or healthcare program. Our state house has been the primary obstacle to that being able to be implemented here. And we are a very fiscally conservative group there, and we'll continue to push back against any efforts to expand Medicaid to that extent, because every state that has done that full-blown Medicaid expansion has seen a 200 or 300% overrun in their costs.
Thank you. Anything further?
Sure. So I've had the fortunate ability to go on a few 911 calls, and I can attest that we have a lot of abuse of these systems, and that's why I am going to stand by the fact that we need to work through solutions to help people, but we can't just be handing out money and not encouraging different behaviors.
Thank you. We are going to take about a 3-minute stretch, so stand up and relax a little bit. We're almost to the end of what we're doing here. We'll come back to some more questions. It'll give our candidates to get a sip of water. We go ahead and stand up. And if you've got questions that have come to mind as we've gone through these, there may be an opportunity for us to ask them. So go ahead and bring them up here. Yes.
I'm good. I just said.
Good. Yeah.
Just want to make sure you guys are ready. By the closest. So the closest are.
All right, last chance for any further questions.
I don't think she feels congratulatory about the whole. Not by me.
All right, folks, go ahead and take your seats. This is a 1-minute question for each of you. We'll start with Brian and end with Xani. And this is, was there a question, thought?
I just started laughing.
Oh, okay, great.
She does that once in a while.
That's okay. Speaking specifically about Pleasant Grove and American Fork, how can the representative for District 57 support and help these cities? And if you'd like, address your feelings on economic development. And this is Brian and then Xani.
Thank you. No, this is a question that comes up regularly, and it's important that we have the proper perspective, the proper expectations. It is a difficult thing to do for a legislator to try to be an economic development specialist for his or her district. In fact, let me rephrase that. It's not a difficult thing to do. It's an impossible thing to do. Each legislator has exactly 0 staff. We are it. We are the office. We have 0 staff. We have economic development specialists in cities. They are designed to seek economic development opportunities. I'm happy to work with them whenever and wherever they ask. If there's something I can do to lend my efforts to a just cause to bring economic development to the district, just call me and I'll be there.
Thank you.
Economic development. So really, that's all under the governor's cabinet of EDCU. I believe that we can work side by side with EDCU and hopefully some of the local brokers in the state, especially Utah County, and have them come and see our property here in Pleasant Grove. I think that that can help. The other question on what kind of a relationship does our legislator currently, the relationship with our elected officials? So for me, I think I want to host a collaboration meeting, a town hall working session with our local officials before legislation and after the session, because I believe that having our constituents have the common approach and having them bring back their opinions to me before the session starts is critical to success.
Thank you. We'll go Xani and then Brian. And this is a 90-second question. And that is, the general topic is transportation. The specific is UTA, its management, and if you think that they need to be replaced or stay in place, or what changes might you effectuate if you could?
So UTA currently makes a lot of money. I think we need to, I personally don't trust their operations. I don't trust their leadership. And I think that their statistics that they run on their bus schedules are a little one-sided. So for me, public transportation, we need to dive a bit deeper into currently how they're operating. A lot of times in these fiscal budgets, we have what they call other on the balance sheet. I don't believe in that word on a balance sheet. I believe that we need to account for every single penny. We had the discussion of BRT, which is not necessarily my issue, but BRT, they said that, the buses are currently a third of the way full or empty. So even if we were to have the double digits projection growth that we're talking about, that's not even enough to incur continuing to dump a ton of money into UTA. So I think that we need to rein back the reins of UTA. I think we need to relook at it. Currently, they've got, I think I said 60 employees making over $150,000. I also think that the director of UTA is making more currently than the New York City public transportation. To me, you can't even compare the liabilities that the two are having.
I think this is an issue that most people will agree on, that UTA is overfunded. We see that in the lack of capacity or used capacity on our buses and trains, except for rush hour. 85% of the cost to operate UTA is paid for by the taxpayer. So to say that UTA makes a lot of money, UTA makes no money. They run at a huge deficit. All of these things were brought up in an audit recently done by the state, and it showed all of the problems with UTA, from inefficient spending to inefficient routes to inefficient leadership. So there do need to be a lot of changes there. But ironically, on the heels of that audit, the legislature last year voted to increase the funding to UTA. Part of that was Prop 1. Prop 1 grew out of that. I was opposed to that. I think we need to hold UTA accountable. I think we need to go through that audit with a fine-tooth comb and deal with the problems. You've got a legislator who's willing to do that. Replacing the legislator willing to do that with one that says they're willing to do that is a zero-sum game. So we need to replace others in the legislature that are beholden to UTA. Maybe they've gone on some trips with UTA and will continue to fund them. But those are the things that we need to do. We're too concerned, we've been too concerned in our funding with building a transportation system of the future. We've neglected the transportation needs of today.
Thank you.
I would just like to kind of preface that I have a master's degree in finance, and I am very understanding of how we get to these equations. I understand the break-even points, how the math calculations work out. I understand the complexity of balance sheets and journal entries. This is, in my opinion, a simple financial dive of audit that I currently have the education for.
Thank you. Yeah, Brian.
Well, I'm going to disagree with Xani there. This isn't a simple financial calculation or analysis. This is a huge political lift. We need to change the political alignment, the political submission to UTA. We don't do that by taking large contributions from lobbyists. The lobbyists are the ones that get UTA what it wants every year. We need to be accountable to the taxpayer and the people that we represent.
Thank you. This is a 30-second question. As we talk about budgets and appropriation of money, how do you plan to make a difference on the Hill? Brian, we'll start with you. Xani, will end with you. How do you plan to make a difference on the Hill when it comes to budgets and appropriation of money? 30 seconds.
Thank you. Well, the first thing you need to do is get a seat at the table. The way you get a seat at the table is you get a little bit of seniority and you participate in the Executive Appropriations Committee. That's where all of the decisions are made. Short of that, we all serve on a subcommittee for appropriations that looks at a very specific part of the budget. And I've been one of the most tenacious legislators on the committee I sit on to try to reveal, to try to expose waste. But as a new legislator, that's about the extent of what you can accomplish.
Thank you. Xani.
So again, after my conversation this last week with Representative Arendt, I think that we have to format our abilities to connect and collaborate. Every dollar amount spent at the legislature is usually governed by priorities. And I think that we can get things done by having relationships. Representative Arendt, she wanted one thing and she didn't get it. She wanted the full day school funding. She's in the executive committee, but yet we bought a port. She was anti that. So I think that it comes down to relationships and working together.
Thank you. We've come to the conclusion. You now have 2 minutes to give a summary, and Xani, we'll start with you, and then to you, Brian.
We all want to build our future. We all find our district important. I'm from Pleasant Grove. I've attended school with many of your kids, and I've had influences in my life by many of you. I remember going to high school here, and I was raised by a single mother, and she was constantly working and trying to make a living. And I remember the ability to go and have a family dinner with one of my local friends. That's what this community is about. I'm committed to making sure that we maintain our family values, that we maintain our small-knit community, and that we can continue to have the prosperity in our community. My principles are not a casual commitment. I also would like to remind people about that I don't come with a record. You know, JFK said it's not about what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. I am here tonight because I am ready to give our district 110%. That's exactly what I will be, is your representative, and you are the people that will elect me to make the change that we need.
Brian.
You're not going to hear from me a big agenda. I'm not interested in making government bigger. I'm not interested in making government more involved in your life. I have served for 4 sessions now and have run bills nearly exclusively to get government out of your way, whether that's out of your business relationships, out of your personal relationships, and to give you the ability to pursue the type of happiness that we all perceive as Americans, as Utahns, living in a free country. I believe that government's first duty is to protect the rights and liberties of the people. And I don't think you can serve adequately and represent a constituency if you lose sight of that. Unfortunately, there are many in Utah's legislature who have lost sight of that. We've become great in our legislature at serving the interests of other governmental entities, whether they be the executive branch or counties and cities, and empowering them to have greater influence and control over your life. That isn't what people want in government. As I indicated earlier, I'm as frustrated as many of you to hear campaign promises year after year about limited government, about fiscal responsibility, only to see those promises not pursued once somebody is elected. And there may be many reasons for that, but one of the reasons is the pressure that's brought to bear by lobbyists. I have separated myself from those lobbyists. The few contributions I receive from special interest groups have not swayed my vote. And lobbyists know this, that my vote isn't for sale, and therefore they don't make contributions to my campaign. I am your representative first and foremost. I always will be. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's give a round of applause to these candidates. And thank you so much for being here. We'll see you Saturday.
Thank you.
Let's proceed to the foyer where you can pepper these questions with even more these candidates with even more questions.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go.
Thank you.